Eggshells. They're touted as one of the most beneficial things for the garden, but they're actually not as beneficial as you may think. Now, they're not bad for your garden, but they're not doing as much good for your garden as you may think. And that's what we're gonna talk about in today's episode. Let's go. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. Like I said, in today's episode, we're gonna talk about the eggshell and why it's not as beneficial for your garden as you may think, or at least in its current state. See, the eggshell is kind of ubiquitous with soil amendments. People say if you have a calcium deficiency or you have blossom end rot, use an eggshell. And that's because an eggshell has calcium. But as we'll talk about, the calcium is not as readily available as you may think. And there's other misconceptions around eggshells, and I kind of want to just clear them up because I see them being spread around a lot. So let's jump on into the first one, which is the calcium in eggshells. All right, I had to move away from the garden because my neighbors thought it was a fantastic time to start power washing their fence right when I was filming this episode. But joys of living in the city. Anyways, I'm not in the garden, but I'm still talking about gardening, so hopefully you guys don't mind. This information is super important, and I wanted to get it out to you guys so that you could use it to grow bigger, go home with. So when you are experiencing a calcium deficiency in the garden, typically seen with things like blossom end rot, right? If you have tomatoes that have a black spot on the bottom, or it can also happen to peppers as well as squash, people tell you often to add calcium because that's caused from a calcium deficiency, and that's true. But the source of calcium is typically eggshells, right? They say add eggshells, crush up eggshells and put them underneath your plants, or crush up eggshells and add them to your plants if your tomatoes are experiencing blossom end rot. The problem is that eggshells are made up of calcium carbonate, which is calcium but in a carbonate form. That means it's a chemical structure. It's not elemental calcium, which is what plants need. The problem is that calcium carbonate takes a long time to break down. I'll explain. Now, if you're a chemistry teacher or have been in a chemistry class, you probably know what this is. This is the chemical compound of calcium carbonate, and it is 4 atoms. It is a carbon tied to 3 oxygen with a tail of calcium. And the problem is that this is a really big molecule. This is really, really big. And plants cannot uptake chemical compounds like this. It has to uptake elemental calcium. And eggshells will take 2 to 3 years to break down and actually decompose the calcium in the eggshell. And so what you have to do is you either have to have weathering occur to strip the calcium away from the carbonate, or you actually have to apply some type of chemical reaction like fire, which we'll get into in a later episode. Many sources of household elemental calcium, and we're gonna do that actually probably right after this video, assuming my neighbors aren't still power washing. But we're gonna talk about household sources of elemental calcium so that you guys can apply it right to your garden and have immediate results. Because you're probably wondering, well, if it takes 2 to 3 years to break this down into the actual usable calcium, how is there a benefit to my garden? And that's just the fact that a lot of times as gardeners, when we're told to do something, there is kind of a chain reaction of events. And the chain reaction of events can sometimes give you a placebo effect that they were in fact effective. Eggshells are great for the garden, don't get me wrong, but in 2 to 3 years. What a lot of people often do is they add the eggshells, and then because they add the eggshells, they are watering more frequently, and the water is actually the reason why your plants aren't uptaking the calcium found in the soil. The water is actually the catalyst that carries the calcium to the plant. And without the water, the plants can't uptake the calcium, and so you end up with blossom end rot. It's not that your soil is deficient in calcium. Some soils may be, but that's only after either a long period of growing or someone that's not taking care of their soil, re-amending year after year, or you're using like a soilless growing medium like peat moss or something like that, which is void of things like calcium. And so you can in fact have a benefit, but in 2 to 3 years. And so oftentimes when the problems resolve, people say, oh, well, the calcium actually was the thing that my plants were missing, and the eggshells fixed it. So it reinforces this myth that eggshells are good to cure calcium deficiencies, when in fact they're not really that good. The calcium carbonate needs to be split right? Now you have a carbonate and you have calcium. This is what the plants need. This is not what they're getting from eggshells immediately. That is a very important myth that we need to distinguish between, fact from fiction, is that your plants are not, no matter how finely you grind this, are not uptaking calcium directly from the eggshells immediately. Now, the second myth behind eggshells is that if you grind them up and crush them up, they're gonna be really good for deterring slugs. This could not be further from the truth. Slugs are not affected by eggshells. In fact, many studies have been shown that slugs actually create a slime coat which protects them from sharp objects and allows them to move right over them. Eggshells will not protect against slugs, no matter how finely you grind them or how many you put them around your, how many of the eggshells you put around your plants. Slugs are not going to care. A more effective solution to protect against slugs is either copper wiring around the perimeter of your garden, which is very expensive and does create a small electric shock, which actually reacts with the slug slime, creates a little electric current, and actually will send them, well, not running, but sliming away. And dry sand. Dry sand has been found to actually prevent slugs in many studies, because if you have about a 4 to 5 inch barrier of dry sand, the slime coat essentially extinguishes after about 2 to 3 inches on dry sand. And because of that, the sand grabs the slime, and because they have another 2 to 3 inches left to go, they end up turning around because their slime is being depleted, which is their only protective mechanism. And so eggshells do not work as a slug deterrent. All right, and the third most common gardening misconception is that you shouldn't use eggshells in your garden at all because of a fear of salmonella. Now, while it's true that eggshells can carry salmonella, you actually have to have an eggshell that's first contaminated with it, one, but then you also have to have large, excessive amounts of eggshells that are all contaminated with salmonella in your soil. And then you have to have the salmonella splash onto the surface of the leaves, have you not wash off those leaves or the fruit itself, and then ingest it in order for you to get salmonella. It is kind of the equivalent of making a mountain out of a molehill. Yes, there is a concern, but the concern far, it's far less of a risk than the benefit of the eggshells, if you follow what I'm saying. I would much rather have the calcium source in my garden after 2 to 3 years, by the way. I'd much rather have the calcium source in my garden than to send these to the landfill. And the risk of salmonella is like, if the calcium benefit is up here, the fear of salmonella is like at the very bottom, if not just touching the bottom on the fear scale. So it's really not something that I'm too worried about. And in fact, I'm someone that's been adding eggshells to my garden for as long as I can remember. And I even collect them from neighbors and friends. I just tell them to put them in a container for me, and I'll just crush them up and add them to my garden. And so I don't worry about it too much. Now, if you are concerned, there's a few things you can do. You can, one, sterilize them. That takes some time, but you can boil your eggshells, or you can heat them up in a microwave. Just make sure to put a container of water in your microwave, please, please, please. I cannot stress this enough. It will ruin your microwave, and it is not recommended to throw just eggshells in the microwave because there's not enough moisture content in the eggshells, and that's how a microwave actually works, is by exciting moisture molecules, getting them to move very fast, and that friction is what causes heat. This does not have enough moisture, and it's the equivalent of running your microwave dry, and that's not good. The second thing you can do to kind of help remove some of the salmonella is just by washing your eggshells. Most of the time, the eggs themselves don't have the salmonella. It's in fact the eggshell, which is not properly washed or has been washing contaminated water, and that can have the salmonella. So if you just wash them, that really removes a lot of your concerns right there. Now, the final thing to note about salmonella, if you're really concerned about it, most of the salmonella outbreaks actually occurs from using pig manure on crops as a fertilizer. And the pig manure then is in high concentrations and splashes onto the leaves of things like romaine lettuce or tomatoes, which are two very common contaminated sources of salmonella. And then if they're washed using water that is considered triple washed, that filtered water, if the water gets contaminated with the salmonella, or, and again, high concentrations in large commercial facilities where you're talking about, you know, millions of heads of romaine or millions of tomatoes going through the processing facility, that water that's being recycled does have a chance at times of becoming contaminated with salmonella. And that's, again, not to fear eating romaine or eating a tomato from the, you know, from the grocery store. That's just me saying that that is the most common source of salmonella. It's from large commercial farms that are doing this on a big scale, and it can happen from time to time. Not underplaying the effects of salmonella. It is a very, you know, very dangerous and nasty bug that you do not want to ingest. But the fears of getting it in the garden are like, forget about it. So that is 3 common gardening misconceptions around eggshells. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. Stay tuned for the next episode after our neighbors out in power washing. I'm going to come back out and film a really great episode on sources of calcium that you can find in your household or even like locally that are readily available sources of calcium that you can use in your garden that don't take 2 to 3 years to break down. So if you like this video, make sure to throw a thumbs up. I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you do like more videos like this, make sure to subscribe because I have lots more videos coming out like this. So as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow big or go home, and we'll talk to you all later. See ya. Bye.